Raw Onion listeners, let's picture this. Let's just picture this moment for a sec here. It's cold. You're under fluorescent lights. You don't really know where you are. All you know is that your body is literally frozen stiff. From your toes, you can't even wiggle them. Your calf muscles are hard as granite. And you're moving up your body. You can't feel your stomach or your arms. Everything, literally, you have turned to stone. And this is not a horror movie. You open your eyes and you realize it's you. You can move your eyeballs, but that's about it. And then panic starts to set in, right? Because what the heck kind of a nightmare is this? So, yeah, it was my nightmare. Ladies and gentlemen, that was real life. And welcome, Raw Onion listeners. We're starting it out a little different today. I'm Stephanie Ohanessian, your host, along with the brilliant Yoshie Barnett in the back producing all of this beautiful content for us. And you know what? We're in the last episode here of May for the theme of resilience. And I thought, what better way to end this series than sharing a little bit about ourselves? And of course, Yoshie has her own story to tell, and she will do so in time. And I think it will be something that you will all really want to hear. And it also touches on this concept of resilience. But today I'm going to share a little about my story about resilience. And this is really how it started. I'm not kidding. That wasn't a joke of a setup. That was me. Years ago, I ended up in that space. My body had frozen solid, completely and utterly tapped out. And it was such a nervous system collapse that I did end up in the ER. And yeah, when I woke up, because it turned out I had completely passed out, I didn't know where I was, and I was in the ER. And every single muscle had atrophied. Every part of my brain had literally extended itself so much that there was no other option but just complete another shutdown. That was burnout at its finest. And as we know, resilience is not about pushing harder. It's what happens when the nervous system learns safety, meaning, and adaptability after the overwhelm. So when my doctor came in and said, listen, you better, because at this point I was taken from work and work had done such an incredible number on me physically and mentally. I hadn't had a day off in 4 years, and this is what I had to show for it, right? And the doctor really said, if you don't get a new job, if you don't take a minute and actually start to listen to what your body is telling you, you're going to have a heart attack. And I was in my 30s, early 30s. And so that is when this rebirth started. Actually, that's how triage was founded, if you want to know the truth. It was founded on this baptism by fire. Holy cow, this is where I'm going to have to start, where my body physically can't even move. And this is where I will figure out what resilience means to me. Because like we said here, it's what happens when that nervous system learns safety, meaning, and adaptability. But it's when the overwhelm has reached its capacity. And so as I was lying there under the fluorescent lights with that exhaustion, that fear, that disassociation, my body was done. And I realized I'd ignored every single signal that had been given to me. Realizing that my body had been screaming at me for months, and I had interpreted every single weakness as that signal to keep going, right? Like, oh man, I'm shutting down, but let's keep on trucking. Let's keep on trucking. Instead of, wait a minute, maybe I need to stop and reassess what it is I'm actually doing, because I thought resilience was actually survival, when really resilience is about understanding your limits. And that is how we come back. That's how we become that rubber ball, right? That Teflon Don. Things don't stick to us. That's resilience. We can get sucker punched, but we bounce back up. And that's that training of that nervous system. I didn't have it, but I knew I wanted it. And that was enough. And really, if you think about it, that's why I'm still here today, because I knew that that's what I wanted. And so culture teaches us resilience is endurance, emotional suppression, the overworking, the grinding. But neuroscience tells us it is your recovery capacity, your flexibility, your regulation, your adaptability, your repair after stress. So burnout isn't usually a failure of resilience. It's often resilience overused past its biological limits. And listen, triage was really built out of this interest in wanting to know what happened, because I knew this happens to millions of people all the time. And I knew that there had to be a real reason. This wellness stuff we're thrown at, the yoga, the walking, the meditation. Hey, I had done all that and it still put me in the ER. So obviously it didn't work. That rewiring wasn't happening. And so if I'm talking about appearing successful externally, sure, right? But at what cost? What cost? What I didn't understand then was that resilience isn't just psychological, it's neurological. And that's literally why I've spent the last 10 years building this company of triage, because it is neurological. And this whole concept of where I messed up was I didn't understand neuroception. And I'm guaranteeing maybe a lot of you guys don't either. So here it is. I'll explain it to you. Neuroception is the brain's automatic, unconscious process of detecting whether you are safe or in danger. So it happens without thinking and constantly when you're scanning your body, your environment, your social cues to decide how your nervous system should respond, right? That's that neuroception. But if you're so overworked, and neuroception really goes hand in hand with resilience, because it's scanning, and if you're really in line with your own signals that your body is giving off, right? If you understand how you're listening to your body, that neuroception is working optimally for you. But if you're not understanding it, if you've been trained, if you've been downloaded with information societally that is not yours, you're going to miss that neuroception altogether. You're going to miss the cues that your body's giving you. So you're not going to be able to be resilient. And many people do not neurologically experience the right kind of neuroception because we're listening to outside of ourselves. We're listening to the noise. We're listening to hustle culture. We're listening to our families a lot of the time, right? When they say, keep on trucking, you keep your head down and you work. And one day the right people will notice you. Hard work will pay off. You've been trained not to listen to your own neuroception. So you might not even know how to recognize that rest is actually safe, right? Rest is pivotal. Last week we talked to Mazarine Treyz, who even said in her experience and when she was writing her book about the burnout of nonprofit sector employees, right? And sort of this looking at the larger corporate mess that we're all in. Rest is number one. Before you can do anything with yourself, with your body, before you can be resilient, you have to understand that rest brings you that feeling of safety. We're trained not to rest. So do you kind of see and understand this hypocrisy, that it's this sort of seesaw of, well, what's really important for my neuroception, what keeps me resilient, I'm actually being told all the time in society, in the subconscious learning of my familial patterns, that rest is not safe. You got to keep on trucking. So you're hearing two different things. Slowing down a lot of the times we're told is not safe. Vulnerability, woo, right? Vulnerability is not safe. That's the memo we get all the time. But oddly enough, guys, these are the safety measures that your body requires, that your mind requires. These: rest, slowing down, vulnerability, receiving help. Those are the things that build resilience. And when you build resilience, you are capable and have a bigger capacity to live your life, because you know you're not going to be torn down with every little thing every time you walk outside of your door. So yeah, what I'm saying is what you've been told is actually really counterintuitive to building that resilience muscle, right? We know the amygdala, that's your threat detector of the brain. That gives you that sense of hypervigilance, that anxiety, that emotional reactivity. If that's tapped out, imagine that being on all the time. I'm sure I'm speaking to people listening right now that you're like, yeah, my amygdala is always on. I'm always hyper independent. I'm always hyper vigilant, right? Hey, I was too. That's why I ended up in the hospital. Prefrontal cortex, decision-making weakens under burnout. Your prefrontal cortex is that machine in your mind that does the decision-making. It's the logic. It's right behind your forehead. If you're burned out, that prefrontal cortex isn't working so well, so you're going to get the brain fog, you're going to get dysregulated, you're going to not have that focus, all the things, ... that you need to be resilient. But if you're not listening to your brain and body signals, that prefrontal cortex, your decision-making, you're freaking out, you're riddled with anxiety, right? Because you're listening to everybody but yourself. The hippocampus. Stress and cortisol impair memory and adaptability. That's where that happens in the prefrontal cortex. A burned out brain literally loses flexibility. It becomes more rigid. That hippocampus doesn't know what it's doing with adaptability. That's what it's meant to do. So if you're ignoring all of these signs, you guys, your resilience muscle is not going to work because all of these parts of the brain are no longer online. So this is why building the resilience muscle is a must. And how do you do that? You start to rewire and you start to really figure out what messaging is coming from your brain that is getting filtered from the outside and what you're really doing with it. Is it yours or does it belong somewhere else? You have to adjust that filter. And let me tell you a little something. You know, triage, again, we're going to talk a little bit about this concept of why I birthed this company. And it is really going into the neuroscience of intergenerational stress. It's because I'm first generation US. Very proud of my immigrant parents, my family. What they did was remarkable. The fact that so many of them are still alive is frankly mind-boggling, what they've been through on both sides. And I know many, many people, Yoshie's family included, right? She is from Japanese descent, and her immigration story to the U.S. is also a challenging one. And so we honor everyone that came before us because they did what they had to do to stay alive. That's why we're here. But triage was birthed because a lot of those extreme, hypervigilant, excessive stress responses, they actually get passed down generationally. And they're not getting filtered out in terms of what is needed and not needed. It's just autopilot, subconscious behavioral patterns. Again, what we do in order to survive, right? But how I was showing up in the workplace, right? My hypervigilance, my people-pleasing, my keep your head down work. The right person will notice your hard work. Don't ask questions. Don't rock the boat. Don't ruffle feathers. Just be the yes man. Because that worked for my grandparents, right, who were refugees during World War II, or my grandparents in war-torn Iraq. That's exactly what they had to do to just stay alive, right? You don't make waves. But guess what? 50, 60, 70 years later, those autopilot behavioral patterns ended up in me, and I was in corporate America, and I didn't have an off switch, and it was so over-functioning in me, those autopilot, nope, better be the diligent worker bee, or I might get killed. I didn't realize at the time That's how I was internally made up, but it sure was the truth. It ended up being the truth, and it was so overextended for what the need and the job called for, right? I needed a whole other skill set that I had not learned how to hone in on. I needed communication skills. I needed boundaries. I needed to know, hey, I'm sorry, when enough is enough. But I didn't know, I didn't hear, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how to listen to that part of my body. And so inherited stress and generational survival plays a huge role in how we operate and how much resilience we can actually have the capacity to carry. Because are we running on our own system? Are we aligned with our own values, or are we operating on the inherited survival systems of the past? And I will tell you, guys, 95%, and please look it up, do your own research, but this is the truth. 95% of how we operate in any given day is subconscious. That means that it's what we were taught, it's how we were raised, it's how it depends on the stress levels of who we were birthed from. 95%. That means 5% is us, our authentic selves, unless we become more mindful of who we really are and let those other parts go. So even trauma patterns, if you're from a family with, let's say, and maybe you don't even know the trauma pattern, right? Trauma keeps the amygdala heightened. That's what we just talked about, even if it wasn't your trauma. Emotional conditioning. If emotions were punished in your home or unsafe in childhood, the brain learns emotional suppression as protection. Scarcity mindsets. If you were raised or your family of origin was raised with chronic scarcity, stress elevates cortisol and weakens that prefrontal cortex, that decision-making area, reducing long-term thinking and increasing survival-based decision-making. Your immigrant survival wiring, repeated exposure to instability and uncertainty. That line of kind of safety arrived, but the nervous system never got the memo, right? You're operating on someone else's mechanics. That nervous system pattern, let's say the children mirror caregiver stress rhythms and emotional states when they're growing up. So that co-regulation, right? Over time as you're growing up, that becomes your baseline. And it wasn't even yours because children are taught to mirror their caretaker. So if you're emotionally shutting down, if you're thinking, I'm not a very resilient person, well, guess what? We all have that muscle of resilience, but you might never have had the chance to work it out. And that's why we're here at the Raw Onion. We want everybody to have a shot and realizing, wait a minute, this is all rewritable. This is all rewirable. That's the beauty of why Yoshie went into business in this act of service to help people, to make sure people don't go down these crossroads alone. That's her specialty, right? And myself, to really help people understand what belongs to them and what doesn't, and not to shame themselves into thinking, I'm not a resilient person. Well, you know, I loved my job, guys. Please don't get me wrong. I loved it. It was full of creative, incredible people. What we got to do and see, really, it's the stuff of dreams, what I got to do. But the system was not set up to support someone who didn't have the resilience muscle built out. And I was one of many. A lot of people just said, I'm just going to shut up and do my job. Well, a lot of people really paid the price for that. 80, 90-hour weeks. Right? There's always a way to do things better. Why do you think that whole concept of work smarter, not harder came in? But we're still not honoring that because, well, who's going to listen to me, right? HR isn't on my side, or my friends don't have time to listen. That's not the point. You got to recognize it in yourself first and say, wait a minute, am I operating my own mechanics here? And that was my problem. I wasn't. And the odd thing is, right, and this is sort of that, in a way, it's this hypocrisy, right? I want talk to you a little bit about this identity and resilience, because what I didn't understand in my situation was that the resilience, yes, it's not just psychological. We know it's neurological, but my body collapsed before my identity did, right? And why is resilience and identity, why are they best friends? Why do they need to go hand in hand? Because if I don't know who I am, how am I going to be resilient to anything? I don't know my values. I don't know what I'm really aligned with. I'm operating in one half of the day, not wanting to shame the way that I was raised, wanting to honor that value system of how I was raised. But in actuality, those were survival instincts of a former need, right? That was not of my own. And then aligning values with a company I worked for. Or you can say aligning values with my friend group, with my community. I mean, so if I'm operating on old generational patterns and then I'm trying to pivot myself to operate in the world around me, where's my identity in this whole thing? No wonder you're going to collapse. Your system doesn't know what to listen to. So yeah, you do have to have an identity restructuring that goes along with this. You do have to have an identity come to Jesus, so to speak, right? And the thing that saved my life and the thing that actually really said, wait a minute, Steph, where's my identity really going to come from? It's this ultimate cultivation of curiosity. I wanted to give up everything. I wanted to crawl under a rock and die. I wanted to set myself up with labeling myself as weak because I had messed up and I didn't figure it out ahead of time, right? That I didn't know what I didn't know. I blamed myself. But that resilience muscle started to grow when I got curious, and that's why triage was born. How do we fix this? How do we get people to figure out the neurology behind resilience, behind fixing that burnout loop? Curiosity activates dopamine pathways, right? So instead of saying I'm a failure, I started to say, wait a minute, there has to be a different way to do this. And that's when the brain releases dopamine, which increases motivation, focus. You're actually starting to get that prefrontal cortex back online with curiosity. Curiosity lowers fear responses, right? So if I say, wait a minute, is this really a red flag? Does my amygdala need to shot out right now because am I really unsafe? Or let me look at it from a curiosity point of view. Curiosity calms the amygdala, that threat detector, by shifting the nervous system from defensive mode into exploratory mode, right? There has to be a different way to do this. So instead of reacting with fear, your brain starts to ask questions. And what happens when you ask questions? Resilience grows because the brain is starting to, what do you think? Execute neuroplasticity. When the brain learns that, oh, wait a minute, there might be something new here to learn. That strengthens that hippocampus. That's the part where that brain fog lives, right? The brain fog starts to alleviate and lift when you're starting to activate your neuroplasticity in your brain. Why? Because you're now thinking there are multiple ways to answer your questions. Why did this happen? Why am I not resilient? Who was I listening to? Everybody but myself. How do I begin to listen to myself? Curiosity also helps people tolerate uncertainty because resilient people tend to approach uncertainty with exploration instead of panic. To say, wait a minute, curiosity actually increases cognitive flexibility, which is neuroplasticity, right? Helping the brain adapt to say, wait, let me look for different answers because now I'm interested and I'm curious rather than, oh my God, this is going to be a catastrophe. And curiosity creates a little distance from the stress. Instead of saying, what's wrong with me? I started to ask, what is this experience trying to teach me? And again, that means that you're going to be okay. You are safe. You are resilient. But you have to be able to be curious enough to look under the hoods of all those cars and say, oh my goodness, this engine was for a Toyota and I'm driving a Nissan, right? Or this is a Lambo engine, I'm driving a G-Wagon. No wonder It doesn't work. There's no shade to this engine. This engine is performing as well as it knows how, but it's for a totally different car. Resilience is being able to get curious enough to find the engine that fits your own car. That's resilience, right? And so the ER wasn't where I discovered weakness. It was where I finally understood my limits were trying to save me. And that's when I started to cultivate this curiosity of, what is this? Because resilience is not about being unbreakable. It's learning how to return to yourself before life forces you to. Listen, resilient people are adaptable but not rigid, okay? Resilient people stay connected to meaning and purpose. Resilient people practice recovery, not just endurance. And that's where we say you have to retrain yourself how to rest, retrain yourself how to listen, retrain yourself to have those boundaries to say, yes, this far and no further. Resilience is about recovering faster from stress by not avoiding stress, but how to really let your body return to balance. Those are things that are in your control. So, as we talk about resilience and as we wrap up today, everybody that came on this month to share something about resilience out in the wild in their own realm of expertise, in their own experiences, you will see the same theme. That resilience is not just about bouncing back, it's learning how to understand how your bouncing ball was made in the first place. And that is not selfish, that is the polar opposite of being selfish. Because what are we if we don't have anything to give? And if we don't know what to give, we're just going to give what we know, and what we know might not even belong to us. You can see how this is a pattern for destruction. But you can also see, based on all the people we spoke to this month and now me being able to speak to you today, that there's a lot more to resilience and you have a lot more control than you think you do. So maybe resilience isn't becoming someone who never breaks, but it's becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves in order to survive. And that is why Yoshie and I are here with all of you. And as we wrap today, yeah, you are a resilient person. There's no such thing as not being. It's just a matter of understanding the program that you're listening to and rewriting it if you have to. And that's why we're here at the Raw Onion. Until next week. Hey, we've got a very exciting thing that's happening. We are going live, visual, not live, but YouTube live. And the first guest you will see has an incredibly exciting story. And she's in the thick of it right now and talk about the need to be resilient. But we're talking about women in business next week. So as you can see, resilience is going to show up everywhere. And until then, I thank you all. Yoshie and I both thank you all for listening to The Raw Onion. Be well, keep on trucking, and just remember you are more resilient than you think. Over and out.